Yay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special Saturday pop-up, which is all about Yin Yoga and the Bhagavad Gita. And I know that many of you are going to be watching the recorded version. I've been wanting to do this section for some time. And so I decided to finally kind of put this together and make this available. Part of why I'm really excited about this is because this particular translation of the Gita, which in my opinion, I'm from a family of teachers, and I really believe that translation matters a lot. And so the piece that I'm reading from today, this is from the Eknath Easawaran translation. And so I'm going to even show it to you really close because I want you to be able to see it. I really, really highly recommend this translation. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Gita in the beginning, and as we practice Yin today, I'm going to be reading a little bit in sections through, but I wanted to talk a little bit about and even kind of enter into it by explaining what the Gita is. And I had even made some notes. This will become also one of the sections, even like within our teacher training, because the Gita is in itself such an important text, and it kind of is a universe within itself. I'm also going to tell you a funny story about how I literally crashed into the Gita, because for me, I actually found the Gita totally randomly before I had found yoga. And this is a funny story. I actually got in this like super micro fender bender in college. This was right before I found yoga. And I literally crashed into a bus of Hare Krishnas. I can't even make this stuff up. Like, this is so good. It's like, I can't even make this up. And what they did after apologizing, we talked, is they said, hey, we want to give you this book. We think you should read this book. And the book they gave me was Mahabarata. They gave me the Bhagavad Gita. And so the Bhagavad Gita is inside the Mahabarata. And one of the things I'm going to read to us is about how when we're talking about the Gita, we explore not mountains or jungles, but consciousness itself, whose real drive is not so much to know the unknown as to know the knower. And part of why this is so important is that, as many of you know, I have a background in neuroscience, neurobiology. If you think about the whole concept of neuroscience in so many ways, there is this tremendous crossover in yoga, because what we are studying is the self. And to study the self, you have to use the self. And so it can become very, very complicated. But the Bhagavad Gita gives us a map and a guidebook. And this is also important because it shows us exactly how to do things, right? It tells us what to do. In fact, in the opening, it says, Krishna tells us what to bring and what to leave behind in our journey. We are given very specific instruction. It gives a systematic overview of the territory, shows various approaches to the summit with their benefits and pitfalls, offers recommendations, tells us what to pack and what to leave behind. And so the Gita is this epic poem, right? 700 verses. And part of what's so interesting is that they say that you could call it a literature in itself. The Mahabarata, so the Gita is inside the Mahabarata. The Mahabarata is so epic. I believe it's bigger than like all of the work of Shakespeare or something wild like that. And it takes place on what we call the Kurukshetra, which is like the field of Kurus. The battlefield is the perfect backdrop, but the Gita's subject is the war within, the struggle for self-mastery that every human being must wage if they are to emerge from life victorious. Now, I'm going to make a note here, because part of why I have chosen to bring you this section now is what I feel about this is different than if you had asked me 2 or 10 years ago. And here's the reason why. Scholars argue a lot about the Gita. And scholars, because they want to believe that yoga honestly is all like, flowers and ahimsa. But here's the truth. We have to know when to fight. And there is this interesting thing where, yes, it is about the battle within. But what's really interesting, and I'm going to talk about this later, is that when we look at the history, it looks like there actually may have been a very real battle around that time at the beginning of Indian civilization. And so at times, the lesson is also, we have to know when to fight. And especially with all of the events we've had recently, you know me, I'm always like, we have to know when to fight, right? The practices of yoga, Kung Fu traditions, they are teaching us to be strong, not just so that we know how to meditate, but so we go out into the world and we help to make the world a better place. And so I wanted to make that that note on that. Like I said, the Mahabharata has been called a literature in itself. And we have essentially, because Krishna is considered avatar, right? An avatar of Vishnu. And this is also important because what makes this really different, what makes the Gita really different, is that this is a direct communication with the divine. So like the Sermon on the Mount, it has an immediacy that sweeps us away, depending not on place and circumstance, because the Gita is addressed to everyone. This is very important too. That's why no matter who we are, no matter how old we are, no matter where we live, for so long, people have picked up the Gita and been like, this makes sense. This makes so much sense on the struggles that we all have, because there are these similar struggles. So addressed to everyone. As I mentioned, when we practice, I'm going to be reading some different things about this, but I wanted to read this very specifically to you. Because like I mentioned, there is this element here where, yes, it is about the battle within, but here's an interesting thing. So in like the Ramayana, which is another really important text in yoga and history of yoga in India, there is mention of a bridge that connects Sri Lanka to India. But in the whole story, it's like Hanuman, the monkey god, does a split and then creates a bridge. Well, where it gets weird is Google Maps, not that long ago, they were like, well, by golly, there's a stone bridge underwater from Sri Lanka to India. And when they date it, it dates weirdly close to the tale of the Ramayana. So there are these interesting things where, yes, there is this very like legendary kind of, you know, cosmic element, and yet there may be something rooted within history. And so historians surmise that, like the Iliad, the Mahabharata might well be based on actual events, culminating in a war that took place somewhere around 1000 BC, close that is to the very dawn of recorded Indian history. And so this guess has recently been supported by excavations at the ancient city of Dvaraka, which according to the Mahabharata was destroyed and submerged in the sea after the departure of the divine ruler Krishna. So again, very interesting things about this connection here. We are told, so in 9th century, there is the sort of author and the grouping of Gita, and this is done by Shankara. And so Shankara was a towering mystic, very important in the 9th century in AD. So the Gita, which again, I'm going to be reading sections of it, this records direct encounter with the divine, because here's what's happening. What's happening is Krishna is talking to Arjuna, and there's this whole concept. This is very important in the Gita and throughout yoga, and you're going to see this theme now throughout many important texts. There is the theme of the charioteer. And so here, what's happening is Arjuna doesn't want to fight. He sees a war between families and he's like, this sucks. I don't want to fight. And Krishna says, you have to fight. And so this entire section is just the conversation entering into the battle. And so let's begin our yin practice today. And I will bring you sections from our epic Bhagavad Gita. Again, I really recommend that you read it when you have a chance. And I recommend the translation by Eknath Easawaran because I have found it to be the best. All right, So what we're going to do, I want you to grab any props, maybe like a blanket or a pillow, our usual yin props. And what we'll have is a very nice, sweet, basic practice. And it will allow us to not only get nice, deep stretch, but to get some of those deeper holds. I want us to start, let's first just come to our seated space. And we're always checking in. I know some of you are in different places, in LA and different places around the world. In Portland, we've just got these warmer temperatures. And when we practice yin, I want us to notice how things can feel really, really different. And it's depending on how are we sleeping? How does our body feel? What's going on in our emotional realm? I know that sun makes me like instantly happy, right? So noticing how all these things can affect the practice. So yeah, we're gonna come to seated. Yeah, grab a blanket, grab a strap if we've got it. I'll scoot this back a little for us and we'll begin. Awesome. Yeah, strap or towel, anything at all. This will be just fine. And so we come to seated, and on this journey of the Gita, we begin to turn the gaze inward. And part of why this is so perfect for yin, and I will discuss this at the very end of class, part of why it is so perfect is, as Krishna describes, really the only way for us to truly attain enlightenment is the practice. And it's not easy. At times it can be challenging, but as I promise you will see, as Krishna will assure you, it is absolutely worth it. We come to seated, we lengthen the spine and draw up out the crown of the head. And we can close the eyes if we want, always let it be your own. We're noticing how the physical body feels. Notice if anything is standing out, if we have any soreness or anything happening. Maybe things feel pretty good. Notice that digestive realm, that gut realm. And of course, always, how have we been sleeping? Now let's bring the hands to the heart. We set our intentions, we dedicate our practice. Let's very gently release the hands, good. And we're gonna gently move our props away. We're gonna begin in our child's pose variation. We start like a little seed, and we might wanna do that one where the knees are together. Maybe we've been liking the one with the knees apart. If we try to do the one with knees together and we get that kind of hip pinching, it might be better to take the knees wide. And yeah, whatever you wanna do with the arms, they can go forward or back. I'm gonna give us about 4 minutes in this first space. That's the way. I want you to find that very first stretch and breathing here. And just keep breathing, keep softening in. Keep the face soft. And at first we're just noticing some of the very physical things happening in the body. So notice what's happening in the low back.
Notice what's happening in the top of the feet. Yeah, notice even what you feel in the fingers and the toes. And as you're breathing here, know that the ancient text of yoga say there are many paths to enlightenment, but the fastest, of course, is that practice of yoga. Because with our continual practice, what we do is we reveal truth. And in these spaces, a lot of times we learn about the body, but our hope is that we are also learning so much about the mind. And we remember that in the beginning, yoga was all about navigating and learning about the self. The physical aspect came much later. Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Keep softening in. Very good. Okay, that's 4. I want you to release that first shape. And yeah, take anything that you want in between or warming up the body. Part of why I decided to also bring us this section was I was talking with a friend of mine and we were talking about this whole concept of, good and evil, and even this idea of like that if we aren't aware that there can be good, that there can be evil, that we are then susceptible not only to it externally, but that then we are susceptible to it in the self. And now this is why I think that's important, because the teachings of yoga, if you look at the way they're designed, the Gita and what they teach, even the yamas and the niyamas, they ask us first to really get to know ourselves so that we can really see all the pieces of ourselves. And we can see all of those pieces only by revealing truth and by having that practice. But I do also think this is an important aspect that, in the Gita, it is about a war, and it is about, slaying the bonds of karma and releasing the things that no longer work. And so there is that piece of it that we have to even recognize that at times, we can do things that aren't good, right? I've done things that aren't awesome in my life. So part of the work is that we're not just looking at, what are the things happening externally that we have to slay, but what are the things internally that we also perhaps have to slay and release. I want you to take a dragonfly variation. So probably legs a little bit wider. Now, of course, if you have been loving that one with soles of the feet, you could do this one. And we were even talking about how if you have the feet a little wider or closer, it can really change the shape. So yeah, whichever one you're working on, we'll do a couple minutes there. Just find that very first stretch. If you're here, I'm going to read to you about Maya, which is illusion. In the unitive experience, every trace of separateness disappears. Life is a seamless whole, but the body cannot remain in this state for long. After a while, awareness of mind and body returns, and then the conventional world of multiplicity rushes in again with such vigor and vividness that the memory of unity, though stamped with reality, seems as distant as a dream. This is also something that my friend and I had recently talked about. And whether we have felt this, sometimes we feel it in yoga. Many people have felt it in Shavasana, but people often also feel it on hallucinogenics. There's this feeling, that moment where you feel pure connectedness, but it's like the moment we name it, it starts to dissolve. This is what we're talking about. The unitive state has to be entered over and over until a person is established in it. But once established, even in the midst of our ordinary life, one sees the one underlying the many, the eternal beneath the ephemeral. And so we practice so that in time, that glitter doesn't fade. And then we call it enlightenment. Keep breathing. And also know that in the strangest of ways, we have actually found in neuroscience that this can actually happen when there is that dissolve of separateness in the brain, which looks like one part of the brain not working and others working more. Then it shows up as enlightenment, complete connection, no separateness from anything at all. Just keep breathing. Notice what you feel in the back. Notice what you feel in the inner hip area. And sometimes we feel it more in one compared to the other. Keep breathing. Excellent. Now release. Yeah, that's 5. Go really, really slow. Yeah, take anything that we want in between. We might want to take a moment on the back. You might want to take like cat, cow, dog. Yeah, whatever feels right. And you'll come to seated space just for a moment. And you might even just close the eyes for a moment. It begins with Arjuna saying, "O Krishna, drive my chariot between the two armies. I want to see those who desire to fight with me. With whom will this battle be fought? I want to see those assembled. I want to see those who seek to fight and engage in this war." Thus Arjuna spoke, and Krishna, driving his splendid chariot between the two armies. Where there is no sense of unity, we can become corrupt. Overwhelmed by sorrow, Arjuna spoke these words, and casting away his bow and his arrows, he sat down in his chariot in the middle of the battlefield. And so this is where it begins. It begins with Arjuna being like, I don't want to fight. This despair and weakness in a time of crisis is mean and unworthy of you, Krishna says to Arjuna. How have you fallen into a state so far from the path to liberation? For it does not become you to yield to this weakness. Arise with a brave heart and destroy the enemy. How can I ever bring myself to fight? How can I do this, Krishna? This is what he asks. He doesn't know where to begin. And Krishna begins to coach him into battle. Next, I want you to do this. I want you to do your hamstring work, which for some of you might be more back. So I want you to come to seated. I want you to take your right leg forward. Some of you actually are going to pull the left foot midline and lean forward. And then some of you already know, just for your skeletal variation, that it will be better to bend this left knee and lean forward. So we'll find some kind of hamstring back variation work. And we begin our adventure with Krishna and Arjuna. Find that very first stretch. Krishna says to Arjuna, considering your dharma, you should not vacillate. For a warrior, nothing is higher than a war against evil. Keep breathing. As you're breathing here, know that in this second section, which is all about self-realization, comes one of the most famous of the quotes from the Gita, which is, Krishna says, you have heard the intellectual explanation of Sankhya, but now Arjuna, now listen to the principles of yoga. By practicing these, you can break through the bonds of karma. On this path, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. Keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Very, very good. Now release that first side. Yeah, super slow. Feel. Arjuna isn't just sad about going into battle. He's also terrified because he's about to go into battle with the greatest warriors that exist. And he doesn't know if he has it in him. What's he going to use to compete, right? Krishna says, there are ignorant people who speak flowery words and take delight in the letter of the law, saying that there is nothing else. But their hearts are full of selfish desires, Arjuna, and their idea of heaven is their own enjoyment, and the aim of all their activities is pleasure in their own power. The fruit of their actions is their continual rebirth, and those whose minds are swept away by the pursuit of only their own pleasure and power are incapable of following the supreme goal, and they will not attain samadhi. So as we come to the second side, we remember that this is where Krishna starts to be like, don't worry, Arjuna, whether or not you know it, you actually have the tools to fight this battle. And that's where he starts to show him that whether or not he even realized it, Arjuna actually has what it takes to win. Now come to the second side. And this one might feel physically very different. Let's approach it slow. Yeah, we'll do 4 on that second side. Yoga is perfect evenness of mind. Therefore, Krishna tells us, devote yourself to the disciplines of yoga, for yoga is skill in action. We probably heard that term a lot in the last year. I hope we have. And it comes from this right here. Skill in action. Because we are told also by the great writers, the great mystics, the great teachers, you can't just read about it. You have to do it. You have to practice it. Many of the texts are written in a way where it is simply that. It is not meant to be read. It is meant to be practiced. That is why all of you, the practice yin, are already on this path. Whether you've read the Gita or not, as you will see, it is within us in some way, because those of us who are seeking have always been searching. Just keep breathing. Keep breathing here. Krishna says, use all your power to free the senses from attachment and aversion alike, and live in the full wisdom of the self. For such a sage awakens to light in the night of all creatures. Very good. Now we release that second side. That's the way, gentle, yeah, release. And you might go on to the back. Be sure to take anything that we want in between. And you might take a moment on the back, or you might come to seated. And I'm going to read this next piece. Chapter 3 talks about selfless service, which in yoga, we actually talk a lot about seva and how we are using our practices really not just to make our lives better, but how we're going to make the world better. And so here, Krishna begins to speak more about how do we use this service, right? How do we use that selfless service? How do we put this skill into action? He talks a lot about the gunas, very specifically, and then we talk about what is the wisdom in action. I said in the beginning, when we talk about avatar, this is like a descent. And so Krishna is an avatar, an incarnation of Vishnu. And there are, within the Trimurti and within the Pantheon, there are so many different avatars. But Krishna is very important. All paths, Arjuna, lead to me. The awakened sage calls a person wise when all his undertakings are free from anxiety about results. All their selfish desires have been consumed in the fire of knowledge. The wise, ever satisfied, have abandoned all external supports. Their security is unaffected by the results of their action, even while acting. This is important. And what this means is that part of the seva and part of the way we practice is we give without expecting the return. And this is really important, that we practice in this way, that we practice from that very pure place. I want you to come now onto the belly. And remember, you might have the feet a little wider. We've been looking at like Sphinx variation. That's the one where you can do like, this one's more like the elbow in line with the wrist. If it's more comfortable, you could do the one where the elbows are wider and the hands are like together. For some of my advanced students, you might want to press more into the hands. I'm going to give us 4 minutes here. And remember, this one can get really intense in the low back, but that's part of what we're looking for. So gentle, yeah, find that very first stretch. Now listen to these words from chapter 4 about wisdom and action. Keeping in mind how old these texts are and just how brilliant and beyond time this knowledge is. It is timeless knowledge. Some offer wealth, others offer sense, restraint, and suffering. Some take vows and offer knowledge and study of the scriptures, and some make the offering of meditation. Some offer the forces of vitality, regulating their inhalation and exhalation, and thus gain control over these forces. Others offer the forces of vitality through restraint of their senses. All these understand the meaning of service. What we are meant to remember here is that there are many paths to the divine, and we cannot judge people's paths, which can be challenging. And we have to remember that a lot of the work is just to be on the path. That's the practice. Keep breathing. Very good. Okay, release that one slow. Yeah, remember the rebound can be very intense there. Excellent. Anything that we want in between? In a moment, we're gonna look at that lunge and we're gonna get into the front body. And so you might grab that pillow. Krishna says, nothing in this world purifies like spiritual wisdom. It is the perfection achieved in time through the path of yoga, the path which leads to the self within, with time. This is important to remember that as we get older, our chi gets stronger. And in my experience, I've mentioned, being in India and meeting, people who had been meditating for 40 years, but in my experience, there is nothing more amazing than meeting someone who has been alive for a long time and has had a practice for a long time. And it doesn't matter if it was a practice in Buddhism, if they were Muslim or Christian, but to see someone who has put so much effort and time and awareness and practice into whatever it is, there's something really, really beautiful about that, because it isn't easy. But what we are reassured when we see someone who is older and holds that centered pure space, we know that the practices are worth it, because we want to be there and we know the only way is to go through it. And that's why we practice. Grab that pillow or blanket. I want you to really protect the knee. So we're going to move into the lunge. Now, if you love that half saddle, some of my regulars, you're going to want to do your half saddle, do that instead. Otherwise, right leg forward, left knee down, and let's look at that lunge. Yeah, whatever you want to do with the arms. Remember, the knee can go past the ankle. It's totally fine. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It's all about what it feels like. As we're breathing here, know that in the Bhagavad Gita, the entire chapter 6, it's about the practice of meditation. So awesome. Reshape yourself through the power of your will and never let yourself be degraded by self-will. For the will is the only friend of the self, and the will is the only enemy of the self. And this is great wisdom, which we find in a similar text in many places, which tells us that we will be our greatest healer. We can also be our greatest enemy. And this is also why it is important that we are aware of not just the evils that can happen in the world, but even those that can happen in the self. The things that we do and the things that we say and the energetic arrows, they matter. It is often something I will see that perhaps we shoot flowers out to the world, but then say cruel words to the self, or vice versa. And so the work is that we're having both be good on both sides, that we are kind and free on the external and that we feel that matching on the inside. Often the trouble comes when things are not matching. And so the practices allow us to be more connected, often mainly to the self. And then it can ripple out into every relationship that we have. As you're breathing here, I would say that if we got a hold of the Gita and we knew nothing about yoga, even still, we might be able to learn a lot about yoga, because remember, it's a map and it's a guidebook. The word asana originates from originally like a grass mat that you would have like sat on to meditate, because it all originated with meditation and the shapes came later. As you're breathing, hear this. Select a clean spot, neither too high nor too low, and seat yourself firmly on a cloth or a skin or a kusha grass. And then once seated, strive to still your thoughts. Make your mind one-pointed in meditation, and your heart will be purified. Hold your body, head, and neck firmly in a straight line, and keep your eyes from wandering. With all fears dissolved in the peace of the self and all actions dedicated to the divine, controlling the mind and fixating, sit in meditation with only the one as your goal, with senses and mind constantly controlled through meditation, united with the self within. An aspirant attains nirvana, the state of abiding joy and peace within me. Very gentle release. Krishna goes on to be like, don't eat too little, don't eat too much, don't do this. He gives this whole list of all these ways to live. There's so much knowledge that Krishna imparts in this moment to Arjuna. He tells him so much about how to do things. They even talk about sleep, right? There's lots of talk about sleep. And so truly, there is a guidebook here on how do we live. It's not just an idea, it actually is telling Arjuna exactly what to do. Okay, we come to the second side now. Yeah, remember, this one tends to be a little tighter if we're right-handed. It's pretty common. And notice also what we're feeling on that inner left hip. We might get some stretch there too. Okay, we're gonna do the same amount of time. I want you to find your second side. Very, very gentle. Breathing here. Now, you know me because I'm always about sleep and dreams, and there's always interesting talk about sleep and dreams, pieces sprinkled without. Phenomenal, because ancient yoga knew things that, in my opinion, neurobiology has not yet to discover, but it has started to discover some of them. The word moha, Sanskrit, which means confusion or delusion, is something like dreaming while awake, living in a dream. To live in a dream or to feel that we are dreaming when we are awake is not impossible. In fact, what we have found is that dreaming is so important in how we process emotion that if for some reason we really need to process emotion and we can't dream, the brain's like, well, I'll just start dreaming awake. We see it a lot for those of us that are alcoholic, myself included. I'm a non-drinking dry alcoholic. Those of us who, when we first came off alcohol, often have wild dreams because we're getting that delirium tremens, and you're actually having the dreaming brain over the waking brain. This is real. You can see it in a brain scan. It looks like a dreaming brain on top of a waking brain. And yoga described it in the Gita a long time ago. When we are aware of the self, we can see and feel everything. But if we're disconnected, it feels like we're being carried through our lives. And so then instead of having the reins on the chariot, it feels as if we're being, drugged through. And so by practicing, a lot of what it allows is it allows us to not feel as if we are, just having this uncontrolled experience. It allows that very centered and controlled experience. Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Very good. Now we release, we take it super, super slow and feel. The first time I read the Gita, I didn't know anything about yoga or neurobiology. And it's funny because I see so much of it differently now. Part of what makes this so profound is that this line that says, slay the bonds of karma. Until quite recently, we didn't understand that there were not only genetics, but what we call epigenetics, that which is like above the gene code, things passed from the ancestors. And so we are told from the greatest of text, and we see from the most modern neuropsychology, that the way we must go through it is we have to become aware of these things and then slay them, because that is the only way to remove them, right, from the gene realm, to slay the bonds of karma. First, we have to see all that has been carried through the generations, and we have to choose what to carry with us and what to leave behind. These texts deliver so much, and at every moment, throughout all of these thousands of years, it has been vital. But it is a text that now, especially with all that is happening, it can be a great tool when we feel like we don't know what to do, when we know that we need to have action, but we're not sure how. The Gita is like, let me tell you exactly how. And it provides that perfect path. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to do your seated fold. So caterpillar style. Yep, both the legs forward. I'm going to give us 5 minutes here. And yeah, if you use your, pillow, or if you want to use that strap, like some of you actually might be using the strap, we could do that. So we'll do 5 minutes, that very nice introspective caterpillar. Yeah, and you can let the feet fall out if they fall out. Just find that very first stretch. In chapter 9, it talks about what is called the royal path. But Krishna says very specifically, all those who take refuge in me, whatever their birth, race, sex, caste, no matter what, they will attain the supreme goal. This realization can be attained even by those whom society scorns. Kings and sages too seek this goal with devotion. Therefore, having been born in this transient and foreign world, give all of your love to the divine and fill your mind with this love. Seeking in your heart, and you will be at last united. This ultimate connection that we seek is available to all of us. And this is again why Gita is for everyone. And in some ways, it is even more for those that have suffered the most. Keep breathing. As we're cleansing the back side of the body, notice where you feel the most sensation. Keep breathing. Keep breathing. Excellent. Now release. Take it super, super slow. We'll eventually all come onto the back when you're ready. Gita really straight up just tells us that, sit, do this, and this is how you can eventually attain enlightenment. But it goes even further, because I would tell you that in my experience, yin holds an even deeper piece of how we can get there, especially as people living at this time and in this place, because we know that meditation works, but we have to be able to get to that space. And so yin can be the sort of missing piece to the puzzle. And with the text and with our yin practice and with our understanding of sleep, I really believe that we are going to be able to understand so much of what they were trying to tell us, and so much of what these ancient brilliant teachers discovered. It may surprise us to know that Sanskrit is actually an Anglo-Saxon language, and that the whole concept of how we view the Hindu tradition is honestly this interesting mix of what came from the north and what mixed from the south. Now, as you come onto the back, I'm going to have you close with the twist. And I'm going to be reading this section. So I'm going to put you in the twist, and then I'm going to be seated and reading. Again, for my advanced students, if you love deer and you want to do your deer pose, you can do that. Otherwise, you're going to follow me on the back. And with both the knees in, you're either going to drop both the knees to the right. We hadn't done this one in a while, so you might do that one. Or you could do like the deeper variation where you would wrap like the left leg once or twice, like that Garuda style. So yeah, we could do that one if we want. That one's quite a bit deeper. Yeah, whichever piece you're working. And again, for my regulars, if you really want to do deer, you can do that deer pose. I'm going to give you 4 minutes on each side. So find your first twist. Yep, find your first twist. And like I said, for these final pieces, I will be reading to you. So you come to your first twist. Arjuna wants to see and understand more of Krishna. And when he does, he says, "You are the supreme, the changeless reality, the one thing to be known. You are the refuge of all creation, the immortal spirit, the eternal guardian of eternal dharma. You are without beginning, middle, or end. You touch everything with your infinite power. The sun and the moon are your eyes, and your mouth is fire. Your radiance warms the cosmos. O Lord, your presence fills the heavens and the earth, and it reaches in every direction. I see all the three worlds trembling before this vision, this wonderful form. Entering into being, some call getting out, greeting you in fear, for the great saints sing, may all be well. O Vishnu, I can see your eyes shining, with an open mouth, glittering in an area of colors as your body touches the sky. I look at you and my heart trembles, for I have lost all courage. And when I see your mouths burning at fire at the end of time, I forget where I am. Krishna says at this point something so important, quoted eternally. Krishna says, I am time, the destroyer of all. I have come to consume the world, and even without your participation, all the warriors gathered here will die. Therefore, arise, Arjuna, and conquer your enemies, and enjoy the glory of sovereignty, for I have already slain all these warriors. You will only be my instrument. This line I think about all the time because there is something in this that is almost like defying physics, meaning that Krishna is saying, this has already happened. It's already done. It's as if time and place mean nothing. These are concepts, again, which in the most modern physics, the most modern neurobiology, they make great sense. Phenomenal because they were written so long ago. Krishna says to Arjuna, through my grace, you have been united with me, and you have received this vision of my radiant and universal form without beginning or end, which no one else has ever seen. But not by knowledge of the Vedas, nor sacrifice, nor charity, nor rituals, nor even by severe asceticism has any other mortal seen what you have seen, O heroic Arjuna. He says, no one has ever seen this before. Do not be troubled. Do not fear this terrible form. Let your heart be satisfied. He also has then told Arjuna that it was not through these certain practices, but it was specifically through yoga and meditation that allowed him this gift of seeing. It is extremely difficult to obtain the vision you have had. Even the gods long always to see me in this aspect. Neither knowledge of the Vedas, nor austerity, nor charity, nor sacrifice can bring the vision you have seen. But through unfailing devotion, Arjuna, you can know me, see me, and attain union. Those who make me the supreme goal of all their work and act without selfishness and attachment, who devote themselves to me completely, are free from ill will and enter into me. Release the first side. Slowly notice clicking, popping movement as you go through center. Krishna has just told Arjuna, something has set you apart because it is your practice of yoga, your devotion. The word devotion we hear again and again. It is your devotion that sets you apart. As you come to your second twist, this is our final shape today. We create this detoxing. We continue every time we practice to cleanse the body and the mind and the soul. Ayurveda, which is our sister science of yoga, helps us to clear the body because the goal is to be better in every way. Now come to the second side. First, find that really gentle stretch. And remember, we spent 5 full minutes in the first side, so I just want you to ease into that second side. Very good. Still your mind in me, still your intellect in me, and without doubt, you will be united with me forever. If you cannot still your mind in me, learn to do so through the regular practice of meditation. If you lack the will for such self-discipline, engage yourself in my work, for selfless service can lead you at last to complete fulfillment. If you are unable to do even this, surrender yourself to me, disciplining yourself and renouncing the results of all your actions. Better indeed is knowledge than mechanical practice. Better than knowledge is meditation. But better still is surrender of attachment to results, because there follows immediate peace. Keep breathing. The final piece that I read to you today from the Gita comes from the section called Two Paths. Krishna says, "Be fearless and pure. Never waver in your determination or your dedication to the spiritual life. Give freely. Be self-controlled, sincere, truthful, loving, and full of the desire to serve. Realize the truth of the scriptures and learn to be detached and to take joy in renunciation. Do not get angry or harm other living creatures, but be compassionate and gentle. Show goodwill to all. Cultivate vigor, patience, will, purity. Avoid malice and pride. Then, Arjuna, then you will achieve your divine destiny." Very, very gentle. Release, go slow. Be sure to take anything that you want before you come to Shavasana. You might want to take like happy baby, where you do like peace fingers, the big toe, hands outside the feet. Do whatever feels right. And when you're ready, come to Shavasana. And remember, get really comfortable, get really warm.
Very, very gentle. Begin to ground back into yourself. Slowly moving the fingers, slowly move the toes and the head, the neck. And gently awaken the body. When you're ready, you can return to any comfortable seated space. Take your time. Let's bring the hands to the heart. Remember our intentions. It is a great honor and it is a great privilege to teach and practice and be together. And we offer very special gratitude for all who have brought us the Gita and to Eknath for his translation. It is such an honor and privilege to have these texts in our lives. Thank you all so much for being here. Be sure to drink lots of water and let me know if you have any questions. I will hopefully keep this up as long as I can. I hope to make a kind of recording of the recording and have it available so that we'll have this section. And let me know if you need anything at all. Thank you all so much for being here and for all of you watching the recorded version. Your donations mean so much to my family. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.